63 Republicans just voted against a resolution in support of NATO. 63 Republicans. They voted on Putin's side of the war. In addition to that, Ted Lieu just tweeted this out. He said, I'm retweeting this without comment for your information. This is from Kristen Wilson, who is, I believe, a CNN reporter, right, covering Congress for CNN. 6 GOP House members just voted against a bill that would require the State Department to report and preserve evidence of war crimes committed by Russian forces in Ukraine. Tom Massey of Kentucky, Scott Perry of Pennsylvania, Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, Warren Davidson of Ohio, Andy Biggs of Arizona, and Paul Gosart of Arizona. So it's like, wait, the story even is bigger than this. Why are Republicans taking Putin's side to the point that they don't even want war crimes investigated? Why would they do that? Well, you know, this sudden shift, Aaron Blake wrote a piece over at the Washington Post a couple days ago titled, yesterday actually, why 30% of the House GOP voted against reaffirming NATO support. And, you know, that kind of lays out this oil infrastructure. But what is surprising is the 63 Republican members of Congress would vote against a resolution in support of NATO. So why would they do it? Is it that they share a worldview with Vladimir Putin? Is it that, you know, some of the companies that want to continue doing business in Russia have basically said to their Republicans that they own or that they fund or that they help to say, hey, go light on Russia? You know, said, hey, dance, and these guys start dancing? Is it possible that it's both? I mean, Judd Legum broke the story over at popular.info, Popular Information, his newsletter, about the memo coming out of a Koch-related right-wing think tank group or, you know, advocacy group, whatever you would call it. And I think it's real that you know, Ukraine actually represented a real threat to Russia. Now, it wasn't a military threat. But keep in mind, a year ago this time, we were talking, and Rachel Maddow was covering in great depth on her show on MSNBC. She, as far as I could tell, she was the only person talking about it. But in Belarus, you've got, you know, Lukashenko, who is this dictator who was just like Yanukovych in Ukraine. They kicked Yanukovych out in 2014, and Paul Manafort had been the guy who brought him to power. And so Manafort came back to the United States in 2015 and volunteered to run Donald Trump's campaign for free. This is the same Manafort who took over $10 million to get Yanukovych into office in Ukraine so that he could keep Ukraine out of NATO back in 2010. This is the same Paul Manafort who took millions and millions of dollars to get this guy in office, to keep this guy in office. When finally the people kicked him out, Manafort comes to the United States and after having worked for basically Putin's interests in Ukraine, comes back to the United States, and I'd say fairly obviously is working for Putin's interests in the United States, making Donald Trump president. But not just that. Manafort also got the GOP to drop negative references to Russia from their party platform in 2016 and to eliminate the party platform's support for lethal defensive aid, lethal defensive weaponry types of aid to Ukraine. I mean, this is like laying on the ground in front of us. It's so obvious what's going on. And autocrats, you know, like Putin, they hate democracies. They fear democracies. Ukraine represented a real threat to Russia and to Belarus, in as much as it was an example of a functioning democracy that did not allow corruption. That was Zelensky. That was how Zelensky took down Petro Poroshenko. Poroshenko was the president before Zelensky. He was kind of on our side. He wanted to make, you know, he wanted to make Ukraine a little more European and build, you know, ties to the EU and all that kind of stuff. But he was also, you know, like the Republican Party in the United States, he was also basically on the take from Ukrainian billionaire oligarchs. And Zelensky came in as the anti-corruption candidate, as the anti-oligarch candidate. And when he took over Ukraine as president, one of the first things he did was create a cabinet-level office that looked into corruption, into political corruption, into corporations and oligarchs buying politicians. It was called the Anti-Corruption Unit. Russia and Belarus are looking at that going, we can't allow this. on our border. So what I'm positing in this article today, asking, why is the GOP getting in bed with Putin over at HartmannReport.com, what I'm positing is that the Republican Party is intentionally getting in bed with Putin. And by the way, this isn't the first time. The first time was 2016, as I just told you about Paul Manafort. So here we are. Putin runs rigged elections in Russia, and the Republican Party is rigging elections in the United States. They've changed election laws, over 50 different new election laws in over 20 states. In some of these states, even to the point where the state legislature can overrule your vote. This is how it works in Russia. So the GOP has done that here in the United States. Putin holds power in part by trash-talking LGBTQ people. And the Republican Party has put homophobia at the top of their agenda, and Republican media is constantly going after LGBTQ people, with these scurrilous attacks that they're actually pedophiles in disguise or whatever. And the simple reality is the vast majority of pedophiles are straight men. So Putin trash talks LGBTQ people. The GOP puts homophobia at the top of their agenda. Putin embraces white nationalism in Russia. The Republican Party embraces white nationalism here in the United States. Putin has actively cultivated neo-Nazis within Russia. There's a right-wing movement in Russia that's openly neo-Nazi. And here in the United States, the GOP lionizes Kyle Rittenhouse and embraces American neo-Nazi movements. Putin has contempt for the rule of law. He ignores, when it's convenient for him, the laws of Russia. And the Republican Party is now embracing people who tried to overthrow the government of the United States, which is the ultimate law. Putin put so much money into the National Rifle Association that they'd become, as NPR described them, quote, a foreign asset to Russia ahead of the 2016 election. Putin pouring money into the NRA, and hey, that money was going to Republican candidates. Are you starting to see a one-to-one association here? Putin frequently lies to his people about things that are easily disproven, the same as Trumpy Republicans do on an almost daily basis. Putin shuts down the independent news media in Russia, while Trump and the Republicans are calling independent news media in the United States the enemy of the people. Well, what do you do to the enemy of the people? Of course, you shut them down or knock them off or kill them. Putin attacks science in Russia, the same as Republicans do here in the United States, particularly climate science. Putin is promoting a muscular form of Christianity through his corrupt preachers. They've got televangelists there too, and they're all hardcore right-wingers. They're defying the teachings of Jesus. Right? They've left Matthew 25 so far behind in the dust, not to mention the Sermon on the Mount. They're just completely ignoring the teachings of Jesus, as does the Republican Party, embracing this right-wing Christianity. Putin's politicians are funded and fueled by right-wing oligarchs in Russia, just like Republican politicians in America are fueled and funded by right-wing oligarchs here in the United States. And Putin hates liberals and civil rights protesters, just like the Republican Party, which now in several states, Ron DeSantis was the first to do this down in Florida, have legalized people driving their cars into protests and killing protesters. Seriously. Our media seems confused about this, but I don't think there's any confusion here. The Republicans are increasingly voting with Putin, 63 of them in the House of Representatives yesterday or the day before, because they hope to turn America into something that looks just like Putin's Russia.